This is about de jure government. And I'd like to point out that I've got a Google group, if anybody's interested. It's called Administrating Your Public Servants at googlegroups.com. I also have a website. It's called, it's not this one. It's sovereigntyinternational.info. And I've also got a Facebook fan page. It's called www.facebook.com/sovereignlivingsouls, and that's got links to all this other stuff too. But anyways, we'll go ahead and start with this. Greetings from the Republic of Texas. I was Speaker of the House of Representatives for the Republic of Texas for about a year and a half. I currently have a diplomatic position with the Republic of Texas, and there are resources available to help you establish your de jure government. And what I'm going to do after the end of this is we have some people here from the Republic of Texas. They're going to have a few minutes to speak with you a little bit. Anyways, in Texas, you know, that's the de jure government here. Obviously not in Canada, but the point is that this is one thing that they learned in Texas, is that the de jure government was here all along. It's just nobody was operating it. It was like in abeyance or dormant. And a bunch of people figured this out back in the 90s, and they started operating it. And they certainly had their, you know, ups and downs and trials and things like that, and are still, you know, having trials. But the bottom line is that, and one thing we're going to learn today when we're going through this presentation is, if you want any real justice, that's where it's got to be. You're not going to get anything in their de facto courts. As a matter of fact, we'll show you here that there's no justice available. There's my commission. Canada is a municipal corporation domiciled in the District of Columbia. Income tax checks are made out to the Receiver General for Canada. The IRS is an agency of the International Monetary Fund, okay? So the United States is bankrupt. If you go to Dun & Bradstreet's website, you'll see, and I could pull it up for you, there's a United States of America 4 Corp. Okay, well, that tells me the first 3 were liquidated in bankruptcy, and we're on number 4. And oh man, what's with this? Here we go. This is the Canada SEC website that shows Canada's domicile in the District of Columbia. Now think of this. What we have is Indiana and Company, 3,460,000 stockholders engaged in providing peace, justice, security, opportunity, health, highways, education, conservation, recreation. And then if you look over on the side over here, it says certificate. Every Indiana citizen is a stockholder in 4,300 school buildings, 960 miles of highway, 34 state parks and memorials, and who knows what else. And so, and if you look at the bottom, it says report for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 1936 and ending June 30th, 1937. So what you have is a corporation. And so there's 2 Indianas, and the same thing is going on here in Texas or any other state. And so what happens when that thing goes bankrupt, okay? Well, then instead of every Indiana citizen being a stockholder, what happens? What happens to the stock? Does anybody know? Huh? The stocks become worthless. And who becomes the stockholders? The creditors. Who's the creditors? International Monetary Fund and the bankster thieves. And so they wind up owning this corporation. And so then what happens is, when any corporation goes bankrupt, this is actually taken from the Alberta Solicitor General's annual report, and I'll talk about this in a second. When any corporation goes bankrupt, then the creditors become the owners, and the stock becomes worthless. It's effectively a coup d'etat. You think about it, okay? The creditors just took over, and now they got to make some money, okay? This is taken from the Alberta Solicitor General's annual report. This is interesting. says Correctional Services Division expenditures of $19.7 million. That included $17.5 million for salary settlements, as well as $2.2 million increased supplies services costs for news programs, community corrections, one-time cost due to closure of this youth offender center. Well, this is interesting. Now, notice it says salary settlements. So they're telling they're not really paying anything. It's a settlement, okay, number one. Number two, it doesn't say anything about jails there. So who do you think is paying for the jails? Who do you think is paying for the jails? Well, no, it's not the taxpayers. I mean, if it was the taxpayers, it'd be in this report, because the Solicitor General handles that stuff. No, no. It's the bonds from the prisoners. They're paying for their own jail. And the jails are probably all private. It's like, you know, the Archbishop of Canterbury owns all the jails in England. I don't know if you knew that. That's true. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the Church of England, owns all the jails in England. Brooks. Okay, so what happens when any corporation becomes bankrupt? The original stock becomes worthless, the creditors become owners, it's effectively a coup d'etat. Who are the creditors for Canada or United States? It's the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The courts have ruled on numerous occasions that the primary responsibility of the officers of any corporation is to the owners of the corporation. All courts, cities, towns, etc. in Canada and United States are municipal corporations that are sub-corporations of the municipal corporation called Canada or United States, as applicable. The creditors of these bankrupt corporations, the international banksters, operate exclusively under private international law. Other names for private international law include, but are not limited to, Admiralty Maritime Law, civil law, canon law, martial law. And we're going to go through court cases that talk about this. The Magna Carta was signed by the tyrant King John in 1215 and 1213. King John swore allegiance to the Vatican with the concessions to the Pope. Look it up on the internet. I've seen Israeli court cases to say that this goes back to the Babylonian Empire. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. It is a dangerous servant and a terrible master. All governments operate under martial law. It is the responsibility of we, the people, to keep our government under control. We are under martial law. There's three kinds of martial law. This is taken from that Diet versus Turner, that non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by this Judge H. Ellett, the Utah Supreme Court. Send me an email, I'll send it to you. Anyways, it's about 150 pages, but it's double-spaced. It's an easy read. There's three kinds of martial law. There's full martial law, there's martial law proper, and there's martial law rule. There's full martial law is when a declaration of martial law is issued, troops are put on the street. It's used only during wartime. It's used on foreign country when actually invaded by a foreign power or put down an armed rebellion. Martial law proper is law of the armed forces. It's when a captain tells a private what to do. It's enforced by court-martials. Martial law rule is the law of necessity and emergency. Allows the domestic use of martial law powers, and it's used during peace times. Evidence of martial law rule. Military script is circulated for money. This action of Congress and passage of the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the ground of the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged and adopted as a war measure. Martial law. Military script is a forced loan. The forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. They form a part of the public debt of the United States. Since March 9, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And this is taken from the U.S. Senate Report number 93-549 dated November 19th, 1973. So, you think anything's changed? Absolutely not. Yeah, no joke. War is not carried on by arms alone. It is lawful to starve the hostile belligerent, armed or unarmed, so that it leads to the speedier subjection of the enemy. Article 17, the Lieber Code. The exercise of the martial law jurisdiction within the several states is the usurpation of common law and subjects the sovereign body to a jurisdiction that has no right to exist within the states. If a citizen acquires the same legal status, artificial character, as those protected by the amendment through the operation of some statutory law of Congress, then said citizen may be brought within the venue of the amendment as a statutory juristic person. By this means, citizens' birthrights become of no effect, and their rights are reduced to the inferior character of statutory civil rights, mere legislative privileges. Okay, and then Federal Reserve notes are military script. Federal Reserve notes are legal tender. Federal Reserve notes are forced loans. Anyone who uses them is forced to loan the government money. Think about it. Federal Reserve notes are promissory notes. When you pay for something with the promissory note, you create a usufruct. If the debt of the United States was paid off, there'd be no paper money in circulation. If you look at Title 12, United States Code, Section 411, it says that Federal Reserve notes are evidence of the debt of the United States. Evidence of martial law rule. Income taxes collected under military authority. Government seizes money without a court order. Government seizes property without a court order. Government seizes bank accounts without a court order. Is that going on? Heck yes. As we have said, the federal personal income tax is collected under a military venue within a martial law jurisdiction. Federal Reserve notes are military script circulated within a military venue. The problem is the people don't understand how the entire United States is covered by a military venue. Under the Social Security Act, there was brought into existence 10 federal regional areas. These 10 federal regional areas are the same as a military base. It is not unconstitutional to circulate military script on a military base, as the base is considered to be a military venue. Military script cannot circulate in the civil jurisdiction of the several states. To get around this constitutional bar, the Congress, via the Social Security Act, created 10 military venues called federal regional areas. The problem the Congress realized was, while Congress could restructure the government agencies into these federal regional areas, the people could not be identified to be within this military venue, but by their own consent. You have to agree to it. The solution was to create another military venue which would trick the people to voluntarily accept recognition that they're within a military venue. Congress solved this problem by creating the zip code. The zip code divides the United States into 10 military venues called national areas. When a citizen receives mail from an agency of the federal government, such as the IRS, in the return address of the federal agency is the district within the regional area the letter was sent from. On the address of the citizen it was sent to is the national area in which he received the correspondence from the IRS. In other words, the correspondence was sent from one of the federal regional areas, a military venue, to one of the national areas, another military venue. Taxing districts are established within one of the federal regional areas, which places the collection of taxes under the martial law jurisdiction. Evidence that there's a military occupation. Military script is circulated for money. Police use the rank structure of captain, lieutenant, sergeant. You don't think that's going on? Police refer to us as civilians. Yes. Courts presume everything. Curfew. How many times have you seen a curfew? I've seen curfews. It's strictly under martial law jurisdiction. State regional areas under metro government provide military venue for the peace officers to enforce a martial law jurisdiction. And then I use some examples in Canada, but there's certainly plenty here. The Lethbridge Regional Police, the Metro Toronto Police Department. This was a war over the intrusion of civil law upon common law. The court of Diamond v. Harris calls civil law, statutory law, superior equity. It is difficult to see how courts of this state are to ignore the common law rule as a rule of decision when it is made so by statute, and adopt the civil law even though it had the merit of superior equity. We can't even begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by statutes. They would be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by martial law. And that's true. And how many times you heard people say that stuff? I've heard it a lot. But common law is still here. You just have to know how to access it. In the meantime, civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood. It looks like it's cut off on the side, isn't it? Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. Equity, if equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following the common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what is called equity in its place. And this is in the Alberta Judicature Act, and I haven't found anything similar to that here, you know, I haven't looked that hard either. In all matters in which there is any conflict or variance between the rules of equity and common law with reference to the same matter, the rules of equity prevail. That's why they can ignore common law, and that's why they dismissed my case, because I went in there and made common law arguments, and the Crown came in, and this was in Lethbridge, the Crown came in and they made equitable arguments. And so then the court just took the equitable arguments and did whatever they felt like doing. And that's how I got them removed, because I just basically went step by step and I showed how they used their equitable arguments under martial law to violate my rights under the color of law. Yes?
Under Section 1-207 of the Uniform Commercial Code, it says that the UCC was written to supersede or complement the common law, and that it should be used in that manner, but the common law does remain in force. It says it in Section 1-207. I read it in the law library in San Angelo. Actually,
it says in there, if I remember right, it says you can reserve your rights at common law.
I didn't see that part.
Yeah.
But I didn't see the Anderson edition either. I had to pick it out of the other stuff.
You can put down without prejudice, right. And that reserves your common law rights. But
it also
again,
says,
it comes down to the courts. You know, even though you're making certain pleadings, you know, what are the courts doing, you know? And so what I need to do is look in the rules and the acts and see what they say. But I know that says that in Canada, and that's consistent across all the provinces. There's even federal statutes that talk about that. Well, that says the rules of equity in common law, that equity prevails. My understanding of what the UCC says is that you can reserve your common law rights.
That's right. You can reserve your common law rights.
Well, but that's not what that says. That says when common law and equity conflict, that equity prevails.
Okay.
Martial law is really no law at all. It's a dictatorship. What is called proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power, a proceeding which requires to be followed by an act of indemnity when the disturbance are at an end. And that's the Attorney General's opinion, February 13, 1857. And this is the Canada Prize Act. Again, it's talking about persons, and I need to get some stuff in here for the Trading with the Enemy Act, because it talks about the same stuff. And the U.S. Declaration of Independence. He's affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power, martial law. He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to an act of pretended legislation. Well, pretended legislation sounds like color of law, and subject to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, that's martial law. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, martial law. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits by trial by jury, martial law. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein a arbitrary government, martial law. Enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. He has abdicated absolute rule, martial law, dictatorship. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us, martial law. For protecting them by a mock trial, martial law. Causes and necessities for taking up arms. Statutes have been passed for the extending of the jurisdiction of courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits, for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, martial law. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, martial law. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us, martial law. A person does not have to consent to canon law. Canon law is just another word for martial law, okay? And you go to the Vatican's website and you can see it. They talk about tribunals and all sorts of stuff. Anyways, a person does not have to consent to canon law. Canon law presumes that the Creator left the Pope everything and he was to be the trustee of the divine's trust. Since no one rebutted the presumption, they consent to canon law. Happened at the first conclave, I believe, in 1302. From that day forward, any time a vessel financed by Rome, all of them that explode new territory, planted a flag in the name of the church. Since the natives didn't rebut the presumption, everything on that landmass became the property of the Pope. In 1666, King Charles II signed the Sesticate Trust Act. Thus, for the first time, we have a testamentary trust, a trust for the deceased, into which the estate of the deceased is conveyed. At the same time this act was signed into law, the town of London burned. It is under this type of trust that you, if you're a person, are now classified. You're a fictional entity and you legally died at the age of 7 and your property is put into an estate and the government is the trustee. Canon 1170, a divine trust is the highest possible form of trust and unique as the only possible type of trust that can hold actual form rather than rights of use of form being property. Canon 1171, in accordance with these canons, a divine trust can never be terminated. That's why they'll never terminate the Social Security number. You just have to quit using the thing. Canon 1179, in accordance with these canons, every child or higher order spirit that is born from now until the end of time possesses a divine personality through the creation of their divine trust before any other legal entity or claim. That's why they make it mandatory to register the straw man's birth. Again, it's persons. If you're a person, it's mandatory. If you're not, it's not. And that's why we need to stop doing that. And how do we do it? We record it in the family Bible. That's how it's done at common law. You get these big Bibles and you can buy them in a bookstore. I might have one here. I'll bet I do. I'll go get it. But you just, in the front of the Bible, it's got a place where you record genealogy, family history, births, marriages, all sorts of stuff. And that's how they do it at common law. And I talk to border guards, they know all about it. We need to start doing that stuff. If you go back here, a divine trust can never be terminated. Okay, that's why the headstone is always in all block capital letters. Okay, that's why the headstone's in all block capital letters, because that's a trust laying there. Trust, an equitable right, title, or interest in property. Real or personal, distinct from legal ownership. Okay, it's all about equity. And because there's no common law, the courts can do whatever they want. Beneficial interest, that right which a person has in a contract. Beneficiary, the term frequently used synonymous with the technical phrase Sesticate Trust. A beneficiary, a person. A settler, this is black 7th. Settler is a person, a founder is a person, a grantor is a person. Beneficiary is a person, blacks 8. Actually, there's 3 definitions of beneficiary there, and they're all persons. A settler, blacks 8, is a person, a founder is a person. Creator, see settler. That's all blacks 8. Equity. This is Bouvier's 1856. In early history of the law, the sense affixed to this word was exceedingly vague and uncertain, as owing in part to the fact that the chancellors of those days, with their statesmen or ecclesiastics, perhaps not very scrupulous in the exercise of power. It was then asserted that equity is bounded by no certain limits or rules, and that it was alone controlled by conscience and natural justice. Okay, that's also Blackstone's commentaries. That's that BL Book 3, Blackstone's commentaries, and Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition. Now, a court of equity is one which administers justice where there are no legal rights or legal rights, but courts of law do not afford a complete remedy. Okay, and that's, see again, the courts of law is common law. Okay, is what we're talking about. and courts of law do not afford a complete remedy, where a complainant has also an equitable right, like the bankster thieves, okay? The bankster thieves have an equitable interest in your property, and so if you go into there, you're basically, and they start arguing equity, then equity is what they're going to get. And you need to get it out of that court of equity, because in the court of equity, you don't have any justice in there. There's no common law. They're going to do whatever they want to do. Equity is the system of law or body of principles originating in English court of chancery, superseding the common and statute law, together called law in the narrow sense. When the two conflict, in appealing to the equity of the court, she was appealing to the king's conscience. Okay, you're asking them to do the right thing. And they do have some power to do that, and it's okay. It's not really superseding common law. It's supposed to go along with the common law unless they're in bankruptcy. Everything they do is under probate law. It's for dead things. A person is a dead thing. Are you a dead thing? And this is actually after the War of Independence, 1778. Whereas taxation by the Parliament for the purpose of raising revenue has been found to by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders, I'll say, caused the War of Independence, that from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not pose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable on any of His Majesty's colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America, except such as may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. Okay, so 1776, we told the King to take a hike. And in 1778, he passed this act that says that we're not going to impose taxes except in commerce. Okay? So, anyways, it was in commerce before, but they made it official, I guess. Okay, and this is another act in 1803, and this actually has more to do in Canada. Offenses that committed within any of the Indian territories shall be tried in the same manner as if committed in the province of Upper Lower Canada. Place and manner of such trial as offenders not being subject to His Majesty, and also within the limits shall be acquitted. In other words, if you're within those limits and you're not subject to the mechanic, like your First Nations, okay, then they have to acquit it. You see what I'm saying? Or if you're not a subject, like if you're one of the people, you see what I'm saying? They're supposed to acquit it. Because, again, they don't have any authority. Every nation on the planet is under martial law. Every nation on the planet is bankrupt. And then it says in Revelation 17, 1-2, I'll show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Gee, that sounds like martial law. And the Vatican, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Well, think about it. Fornication is an illicit activity. You know, like they're perjuring their oath of office is about as illicit as you can get. And all the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And so they're getting drunk with all the commercial paper that's floating around. That's exactly what's going on. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Well, okay, that sounds like the 7 hills of Rome, is what that sounds like. And this has been going on from the beginning of time. This is as old as time itself. They create 2 classes of citizens, and then they proceed to violate everybody's rights with that. But the stranger that dwelleth among you shall be one as born among you, for thou shalt love him as thyself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. That's how they enslaved the children of Israel. They went and created the 2 classes of citizens, and then they enslaved everybody. Ye shall have one ordinance, both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. 2 classes of citizens. Those born in the land and those that are strangers. Okay? And now think about it. A stranger is a person, right? A stranger is a person. Love ye therefore the strangers, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. This has been going on from the beginning of time. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother. Unto the stranger thou must lend upon usury. Okay, so if you have a Social Security number, you can borrow money, and if you don't, you can't. Okay, so obviously the stranger is someone that's a person that has a Social Security number or a U.S. citizen. You see what I'm saying? And if you're not, then you don't get to borrow money. You don't get to do anything. And that's exactly, this is not anything new. This has been going on forever. All of this martial law stuff is for Ford and GM. If you're a Ford or GM employee, then you're a slave for Ford or GM. If you want to be free, then we, the people, have to quit letting Ford and GM run the country. Do you want to be free or a slave? Is there a price for your freedom that makes your freedom too expensive? Do you know who you are? The current government is de facto. It's essentially a gang of pirates who are engaged in taming some prize on the high seas of commerce. The only thing saving us is the fact that they have an oath of office, government of the people, by the people, of for the people. That's what de jure government is. De jure government is a government that is owned and operated by the people. I've seen U.S. Supreme Court cases that said that the reason the government had immunity from suit is because it was de jure government, and for one of the people to file suit is like suing yourself. It's impossible. They will continue to violate your rights more and more every day until we, the people, decide to take our government back. They have taken away the grand jury. Well, the grand juries, in Canada, they've taken away the grand jury. Here, the grand juries are highly regulated, and so it's all just a charade. Huh?
A tool of the prosecution nowadays.
Yeah. They've taken away the common law jury, and there's certainly there's some of them in criminal matters. Sometimes they're close to common law, but the judges give them instructions, and if the common law jury tries to do a jury annulment, they go and put them in jail. So I don't know if that's common law. They've taken away the 12-man jury. The jury you see these days are a complete farce. Common law has all the solutions we need. Common law is we the people. Common law is God's law as found in the Bible. Common law is 800 years of jury trial decisions in Old England. Sections 52 and 61 of the Magna Carta provide for a grand jury. Grand jury operates in the county. You need a de jure county judge to swear in the grand jurors. You hold an election for the county judge. In Toronto, what they have is they go and overlay things with these regional municipalities and stuff like that, and that's all just a bunch of garbage. And you need to know that the county is still here. They don't do that here, fortunately, so it's kind of a moot point here. Grand juries bring an indictment based on majority vote. Grand jury indictment is saying there's probable cause. A grand jury indictment proceeds to a common law jury for trial. When I was living in Uxbridge, Ontario, there was a traffic court with a coat of arms in Pickering, and across the street there was an unused courtrooms with flags in it. Okay, and this is what was going on in Canada, and I would wonder. They even talk about it here in Texas too. But in Canada, what I was looking for this courthouse. I got a seatbelt ticket, right? And you know, what I did is I sent them a letter and I said I want to see the contract. And of course they said when I got there, oh, we didn't get the letter. And I said that's okay, I got a copy, and I give it to them, right? And what they did is they waited till the very end for me, of course, like they do, because they don't want all the sheeple hearing all this stuff, right? So anyways, what happened is they dismissed it at the end, eh? But so anyways, what happened is I was looking for this courthouse, and across the street was this courtroom. It had flags in it. It was de jure flags, no gold fringe or nothing like that, and it was sitting there empty. And it was across the street from that, in this office building, was the de facto court. In Canada, they put a coat of arms. They don't put a gold fringe flag or anything like that. Coat of arms, which is still a military symbol, and they make war in you there. They didn't want to do it in the de jure courtroom. And so but the point is, though, is the de jure courtroom is waiting there for somebody to operate it. See what I'm saying? And here, you know, they talk about these, in Texas statutes, it talks about common law courts of record and stuff like that, you know. And I'll bet you that I'll bet you that if you did some research, you know, there's a guy in Edmonton that did this. He wanted to grow marijuana plants. And they wanted to grow them in this head shop across the street from the courthouse in downtown Edmonton. And what they did is they started putting out flyers. And the flyers started saying how they don't have authority, okay, to regulate his right to grow marijuana plants, okay? And they put these flyers out all over downtown Edmonton for about 6 months. And then they decided, okay, well, we're going to start growing our marijuana plants. And they started growing them. And they were getting real big and bushy in this window across the street from the courthouse. And one day the cops showed up, right? And the cops said, we're not going to do anything about your marijuana plants, but we'd like you to move them to a different window because the judges across the street don't like looking at them in the window. And and this is a true story. And what the guy running the head shop, he thought about it for a little while. He says, nah, he says, the plants like the light, I'm going to leave them there. And the cop said, that's okay, we just had to ask. See ya. That was it. So the point is if you point out how they don't have any authority, okay, again, you take away their right to presume, okay? And you have them where it hurts, okay? For perjury of oath, for all sorts of indictable offenses that are going to get their butt put in jail for who knows how long, okay? If you do it properly, then you can do anything you want.
They never answered the flag. They never challenged the flag.
Well, they can. If you lay your foundation properly, there's no answer. You see what I'm saying? So the point is, I'll bet you that there's de jure courtrooms here in Texas that are waiting for us, the Republic of Texas, to use. And all you need to do is maybe start looking around. You probably can find them around. Like in Edmonton, they say there's a common law courtroom in the basement of the courthouse in downtown Edmonton. And so, you know, I saw this one in Pickering myself, okay? I'll bet you the Republic of Texas, the state, the Constitution says that the common law courts are here, okay? So we need to find out where they're at and then tell them, hey, you know, maybe administrate the district attorney or something like that, and tell them, hey, you know, we're convening common law court and we want you to provide a place for us to have our meetings.
They claim each county has one.
Well, okay, so we got to find out where they're at. They're here. I can just about guarantee you. Why should we go and be holding our courts in Denny's or someplace like that when we can be having a real court provided? You see what I'm saying? And I'll bet you they'll even give you guidelines on how to do it. Not that you have to follow any of it, but it's certainly some recommended guidelines that would be good ideas on what to do and how to do it, you know?
The old Red Courthouse down there.
The thing is, anyways, the point is I'll bet you the common law courts are here. They'll give us a place to hold the meetings, the grand juries and the common law courts, and it's just a matter of asking the question. Common law jury. With a common law jury, there's no judge, okay, in a common law courtroom, okay? The common law jury calls the witnesses, questions the witnesses, determines the law and the facts in the matter, and even pronounces sentence. And the common law jury is not subject to appeal. Once it's done, it is done. There's a decision from a common law jury is not appeal. The fact that you can make an appeal in the de facto courts is proof they're de facto. The decisions of a common law jury must be unanimous. A common law jury consists of 12 members. Many times, some members of a common law jury didn't understand certain points of law, so they would ask someone who had been on a lot of juries, a jurist, to sit in on a trial to advise the jury on different points of law. A common law jury can do anything they want. Now, does anybody know what a judge is called nowadays? Yeah, lots of names, I'm sure. A judge is called a jurist. Okay? And so what I'm saying is that gradually what happened is the judge, this guy that was sitting in there to advise the juries, gradually took over the courtroom. You see what I'm saying? And to the point now that the jury gets jury instructions and all sorts of stuff. Common law convictions in Texas, and I think, do you remember that case? I think you were talking about it one time. But there was supposed to be a case here in the 90s where somebody was damaged by one of the cities here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they took it to a grand jury and got an indictment, and then they took it to a common law jury and convicted them, and the city or whoever it was basically blew it off, ignored it, thought it was a big joke, and they got a conviction. And then they sent the conviction to Standard & Poor's in Dun & Bradstreet, and they couldn't get financing for their freeways, they couldn't get insurance, they couldn't get nothing from Wall Street. And what happened then is they brought a case into their de facto courts asking for this conviction to be overturned, and huh?
I guess they couldn't do it.
Well, yeah. Huh? Was it in Richardson? Okay. And so what happened is the judge says, I can't do that. If I did that, I'd lose my bond. Yeah. That's the power, okay? That puts the power back in the hands of the people. You have no idea the power. And then this is Robin Boulanger is the guy that I was telling you about That was some of his friends that went and did the thing with the marijuana plants. In order to have a common law jury, in order to have a grand jury, you have to have a common law jury. You need a common law judiciary, okay? And this is where the Republic of Texas will come in, because Robert Savarese is the chief judge for Nacogdoches County, and Norman Sewell is the chief judge for Robertson County. And so what the judge has to do is he needs to swear in the jurors and the grand jurors, and then you proceed. Since you're having an election, well, around here there's already, you know, some people, some of the offices are filled, but the Republic of Texas needs people to fill offices, and we all need to participate, and that way we can operate our government, and that's when we start having the power. Okay, we need to operate our de jure government, and if we're not doing it, then, you know, not only are we depriving ourselves of justice, we're depriving a lot of other people of justice. And, you know, I don't know, my thought is that when I'm there at judgment bar before God, and I'm saying this guy violated my rights, and then he's saying, well, you know, I thought you were a corporation, and it's because of stuff I did. What am I going to say? And then when God starts asking me, you know, what did I do to provide justice for these widows and orphans and all these people that are certainly entitled to justice, and they weren't getting it in these de facto courts, what am I going to say? If I haven't done everything I could do, then I'm going to be accountable. So, you know, we all need to do our part to help, you know, our government and to bring back our de jure government and get rid of this de facto, you know, gang of criminals, really. And all it takes is for enough people to stand up and say enough, and their game is up. A typical tactic of the enemy is to divide and conquer. And this has happened, you know. I mean, there's certainly, I know for a fact that in the Republic of Texas, there's been agents provocateurs sitting in there to stir things up and to cause problems. And we need to look beyond all of that and keep the proper goal, which is freedom for everyone, and just keep moving ahead, and just like water off a duck's back. You just need to keep. Bob Wilson with the Republic of Texas. He's going to talk to you for a few minutes about the Republic, and I would encourage you to all, you know, listen to what he has to say, and he will certainly give you something to think about. And go ahead.
One is to establish rules for each house under which we operate. Meaning, what do we do with somebody who needs discipline, for instance? What do we do when somebody moves outside of the district that they represent? The other thing we do is either write laws or bring up to date ancient laws from 1836 to 1845 that were already passed and were laying dormant for 175 years. A lot of that bringing up to date has to do with things like all people are equal, whether you're Indian, man or woman, black or white, you know, just because those things were not even being thought about in 1836. A lot of it has to do with contending with what we have to contend with today due to the de facto situation. We've come a long way in restoring what we have. For instance, Judge Norman Sewell is the Chief Justice of Robertson County, which goes all the way, let's say, from Azle to College Station. It's a long way, you know, and there's a little, today's Robertson County is one little part of that. We provide the law, and clarify it, that enables those courts to meet. There was the problem of defense of the nation of Texas. We are not a state, we're a nation. And we debated for quite a long time about this word militia and how to work around that, and finally came up with something that's just called County Readiness Volunteers. So there's now a law in the books that enables each county to have readiness volunteers who are completely prepared and equipped for any kind of emergency that you could imagine, if you want to use your imagination. And that's the kind of thing that we're doing. In the process, of course, we have national elections and county-wide elections. We're a nation. We don't have states within the nation. We have counties. And let's see, I can let somebody else come up, or I can answer a couple questions, if there are questions. Oh, yeah, the money, yeah. You can't have a nation unless you have your own real money. Remember, these FRNs, Federal Reserve notes, are not money. They are just evidences of a debt. They're certificates that there exists a debt. You haven't, in your lifetime, you haven't paid for things with real money. And so just a year and a month ago, we came out with our first piece of silver money. And we call it the Alamo because on the back of it is a beautiful picture which our government originated as a graphic art piece of the Alamo. And that is 1 troy ounce of pure silver. It's a beautiful proof grade coin. Will Sprayberry here has 1 or more of those with him, just so you can see them. There's one. And about 6 months later, we came out with a 1 ounce copper. We set a precedent that each of these coins, or we call them medallions, because we're doing, through the use of words, we're doing everything we can to avoid raising red flags with the de facto government in D.C., that country to the north of us. And so we just call them medallions. There's no law against minting commemorative medallions, and so we commemorate the Alamo. Remember the Alamo. We commemorate the Battle of San Jacinto. We lost at the Alamo, we won at San Jacinto. And as a result of that victory over Santa Anna and his armies, this became a nation forever by international treaties. Still is. It never stopped being.
He gave us the land for it, in which
He signed a treaty, an international treaty, which said the land called Texas belongs to the people who live on the land forever and ever. Amen. That's it. So we are just releasing. The dies are made and are probably getting at the mint today. The 1/2 ounce silver, which is called the Justice Medallion. The inscription on it is, around the top, to establish justice, which is part of the preamble to the Declaration of Rights, which is part of the original Texas Republic Constitution. One of the purposes of having a government is to establish justice, so that those who have been harmed by another can get justice finally. We'll go on and do other medallions to form the currency of the nation, and we do trade. It's going back online soon, a lookup on the internet of thousands of merchants who will accept these silver and copper and eventually gold coins in exchange for the goods or services which they are selling to the public, or to people. You know, it's easy to slip into the old language, isn't it? Anybody else? Got a word? Steve? Will?
Oh. Please visit our website. I put a lot of hard work into it. Thank you.
Hey folks, my name's Richard Wagoner. I'm a senator from District 9 out around San Angelo, Bexar County. We are a small group. We are trying to grow. We need publicity, and the only way we can get publicity is to get more people involved. The more people that'll get out and talk about it and spread the word. We've got to have the support of the people who live in the Republic of Texas. That is Texas, the eastern half of New Mexico, the finger of Oklahoma, and pieces of Kansas, Colorado, and Wyoming. And we've got to get the word spread out before we can do anything, because we have to be strong enough to tell the government to take hike and they'll leave us alone, and that's something that you need to help us do. Whether you join the Republic of Texas or not, stand up and be counted when the time comes.
My name is Robert Savarese, Chief Justice of Nacogdoches County. We need some people to get our county up and running. We need clerks, notary, sheriff, deputy, bailiff, and we need some people to volunteer so we can get the county up and running. There's a few more positions, so you got to be living in Nacogdoches County to participate in it.
And you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, Judge, but one other thing is that we try and have, on a fairly regular basis over there in Robertson County, we try to convene for a grand jury, for a publicly convened grand jury, so that people can bring these criminal complaints. Now, I can see with what Glenn did, it doesn't matter really where you are physically located. He was able to go and get our Chief Justice in Robertson County to get him taken care of on his paperwork. So I'd just like to suggest, and we need to work on this too in our county, if Nacogdoches County wants to have a grand jury and they want to call that on a certain day, then we in Robertson County should come over and lend support until we've got enough people in the individual counties that they'll just kind of, eventually you'll have more than enough people in each county for a grand jury. But I think in the counties we need to support each other if a county calls a grand jury, and I would just like to ask and encourage everybody over here on this Dallas side of town, if you see an email for a Robertson County grand jury, please try to attend, because you never know. Someday it may be you that needs to bring the criminal complaint, and you need a grand jury to do the work for you. Here you go, Bob.
That just spawned another thought, which is Glenn mentioned that when juries weren't sure what to do, they invited an experienced jurist from some other place. And so when Nacogdoches or any county is ready to start having a grand jury and a common law jury, they can call on one of the more experienced, not highly experienced, but more experienced jurists who have been meeting in Robertson County for a couple years now. This is rather unique because just last Saturday, exactly 1 week ago, the Congress met and talked a lot about the need for Congress to get out where the people are so that people don't have to drive all the way to College Station. And we're all in favor of that. So if you can put something together with a number of people, we are willing to come to wherever you are. And our House has the responsibility to issue those charters within the